for all of you, as you can see and read. But this is Beth Goad, and she is executive director of the Episcopal City Mission, and we welcome her this morning. Haven't been able to catch up with you in the last year and a half, so we're anxious to hear how you guys are doing. And for some that may not know as much about you, if you could give a
Sure.
you know 5-minute dissertation on on you, the
Well,
mission, and so
yeah,
thanks.
I will tell you that my background is very eclectic. I spent about 30 years in the corporate world doing. I was a chemist for a while, and then went into the marketing area, and had always done a lot of volunteer work, and was a member of the Junior League of St. Louis. And during that time, I served on boards and volunteered with different community. And finally, I said, I've had enough of this corporate world. I want to do something else. And the timing was good. And I've now been at Episcopal City Mission since July of 2013. So I'm coming up on, I guess that makes it, what, 8 years. So it's been a journey. I love it. It's the job that I do. The chaplains do the hard job. They do the job of going in and seeing the kids and working with them. And I do the fundraising and the HR stuff and support them and make sure that they have a chaplain for them. We are blessed to have Reverend Paul Metzler, who does spiritual care with them. And that's been wonderful because he meets with them once a month, and that gives them a chance to have some spiritual guidance and support. So my job's a little different. In fact, Friday I went in and to the office at the cathedral, and they said, "Oh, we're working on the new internet system." So I had to turn around and go home and work. So, and I'm not sure Monday when I go in how I'm going to log on. We'll see. They told me, "Oh, it'll be simple," and I'm like, I don't know. Anytime things change, they never seem simple. So we'll see. Those of you who may not know a lot about the history of Episcopal City Mission, it actually started in 1894 by some volunteers at Christ Church Cathedral. And what they were doing was trying to reach out to people that did not have access to spiritual care. And so they would go in and meet with people at the workhouse. They would go to the hospitals. They did some work with kids in what in those days was called the boys' farm, which is today's detention. Anyway, they did that they called themselves city missions. And so that went on for many years. And then in the early 1900s, the St. Louis County Family Court came to them and said, would you be willing to work with our kids that are in detention? And that started the first of that part of the mission. And in the 50s, 1953, I think it was, the Protestant churches in the city of St. Louis decided that they wanted to get together as a group and talk about how to serve the people in the city and how they might be able to, my words, not theirs, but divvy up, kind of say, you work here, we'll work there. And it actually went very well. And the Episcopal bishop at the time said, we want the kids that are at risk. And so by saying that, that took the whole focus of what was called City Missions, and then it changed names a couple of times, but to become Episcopal City Mission and to focus all our efforts on kids that were in county and city detention. And they'd also done a little work off and on from 1950s to now with kids at the Division of Youth Services up in North County. So in 1954, the bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Missouri, he hired a young man called J. Albert Dalton, and he was a priest. He came very well prepared for the job because he'd been working with young people that were at risk, especially young men. And so he was our very first executive director of Episcopal City Mission. I have trouble this morning. The mission at that point became chaplaincy to support, to provide support, hope, and healing to the kids that are being detained. A few years ago, we decided that, our mission statement always included children in detention. And we changed that to children in the juvenile justice system. And that's been a really good change, because not only are we calling on the kids in city detention, county detention, and doing some work up at Missouri Hills, which is the Division of Youth Services. And if you later want to ask questions about what's the difference in all those, please feel free. But anyway, we also are calling on young people that have been certified as adults but are still 15, 16, 17 years old, but because they've been certified as an adult, they've been moved over to the Justice Center with the other adults. And that's very troubling for kids. That's very hard. So we have right now 3 young men, I believe 2 are 15, 1 is 17, I believe. And they are being visited once a week by Chaplain Norman and once a week by Chaplain Deborah. And that's been great for us to be able to stay with those kids. They all met Chaplain Deborah when they went through juvenile detention before they were certified as adults and sent over to the adult system. So they saw a friendly face. They were able to share their concerns and their anxiety and their hopes of what might happen to their case. The very difficult period right now for the chaplains that are calling on these 3 young people is that 2 of them really want to get their high school diploma, and there is no legal responsibility for the Justice Center to provide education for those young people. They say they're here, they don't get those services. So that's been hard, and we've been trying to provide the kids with books and things that they can use to keep their minds sharp. And we've even tried a couple times to see if we could get a tutor to go in and work with them, but that hasn't worked out. So anyway, but along comes this thing called a pandemic, and life changed dramatically for the chaplains. And I have to tell you that if any of you have met Chaplain Kevin Aldridge, he's been with us 10 years. He is struggling. He needs to see his kids in detention. And around Christmas time, he said to me, I think I'm just going to go in there. I'm just going to go into city detention and spend time with the kids. I said, so you're going to break and enter, and am I going to need to go bail you out of jail so that we can get you out? And he said, you may have to. And it's been really hard. But one of the things we've done is we've done Zoom sessions, we've done phone calls with the kids, doing whatever we can to provide them some services. Good news, a few weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, we got a call from the county detention center, and Kelly Landaker, who's the supervisor there, said, I got good news for you. We are going to let you back in to see kids. So that happened to be the day that Chaplain Clive was able to go over there, and he spent 5 hours there, and the 6 boys just talked. And he didn't sit all 5 hours with all 6 of them. He spent some time with each one of them, and it totaled 5 hours. And finally, the staff came in at 8:30 and told him, you really need to leave. We have to get the kids ready to go to bed. So anyway, he said he didn't want to leave. He said, I just wanted to stay and keep talking, because they were pouring out their hearts. And it was really important to him that he stay as long as he could to be there for them. Since that, county is the only detention center that has opened up. I just checked in with city detention, and they don't know when they're going to open. I don't know if the new CDC rules will change that, but we're just being patient and waiting. However, in the meantime, we have had a wonderful time having the different churches have volunteered to make goodie bags, and you guys have made them for Valentine's Day this year. We had someone who made them for Easter. We had somebody who made them for St. Patty's Day. So the kids have just really been able to know that people are thinking about them and caring about them, even if they're not able to come in and do in-person programming. When they opened up the county detention, the way it's opened up is the chaplains can only go into the visitors room, and it's set up to host 4 children because they'll have plexiglass in front of them. So that kind of limits what we can and do with them. But a lot of times it's really, right now, it's just that one-on-one conversations with them, kind of help them through.
Beth,
Yes.
how old is the youngest to the oldest?
They typically, their ages go from 11 to 17. Currently, I think maybe the youngest right now is probably around 14, 15, and the average age right now is about 15. We have had, in fact, there's a gentleman who works at the detention center, and he's had a long history of, he was 8 years old when he was first put in detention, and he's now in his early 50s. He was in detention in and out for many years before he ended up in the adult system and went to prison. It took a lot for him once he was out of prison to get approval to come in and work with the kids. But he now works there, and he is a wonderful person to be able to talk to them about where they're at and how it can get better. He said the detention center actually raised him because his family life was pretty bad. And when the superintendent that had been there for 30 some odd years retired, Cheryl Campbell they had a little retirement party for her, and he was there, and he said she was like my mom. She made sure she checked in with me even after I went to prison, and so he said I couldn't not be here, and I wanted to come back to the detention center and help these kids learn a lesson that it took me a long time to learn. So we have 4 wonderful chaplains right now, and 2 of them started right before the pandemic. That was challenging for them. Chaplain Kevin, who's been with us the longest, is now 10 years. Chaplain Deborah is about, she's kind of been off and on since 2014, but came on full-time in 2018. We have Chaplain Norman, who joined us in January 2020. And we have Chaplain Clive, who is an Episcopal priest and is the first Episcopal priest to be a chaplain in a while. But it's a great diverse group, having 3 African-American chaplains, 1 female, which is great, and then having Clive, who's Indian. When I interviewed Clive, he said, I don't know if I'll be a good fit, but he said, I worked with kids in India who were in their version of juvenile justice. And he said, I learned a lot doing that. And I think he views the caste system in India as similar to our socioeconomic situation here in the States. And when he said it that way, that one day I went, you know what? I didn't think of it that way. But in India, it's difficult. You can't even hardly move out of a caste system once you're put in a particular caste. Well, it's very difficult for our people that are in a lower socioeconomic situation to get their schooling, to get their education, to move forward and get good jobs. And I mean, we're seeing that the pandemic kind of even brought some of that really to the surface. But the work we do with the kids, I know that your church has been very gracious and very forthcoming with help, whether it was financially or holiday gifts. This year we had to just deliver the gifts and let the staff distribute them. But we're looking forward to that time we can go back and deliver them in person and spend time with the kids. We're still doing the virtual birthday parties. In fact, there were 2 of them on Friday night, and I got pictures, and the volunteers could only deliver them, even though county has opened up a bit, they still had to deliver everything to the door and let the staff distribute them. We've been doing chapel service by Zoom, so very much like you've been doing your chapel. It's interesting because we also, in the last year or 2, have been doing what we call community-based chaplaincy. And you may have seen some things about that, but there are kids that are part of the juvenile justice system in St. Louis County, and they are not being detained, but they are what we call court involved. They're being supervised by the court. They're also have to have a DJO, a deputy juvenile officer. They have certain things they have to meet, requirements, programming they have to go through. They might have to go through anger management class. They might have to go through special tutoring if they're having trouble with school, that kind of thing. But one of the things they came to us, the court came to us and said, we don't have anybody to do a grief and loss group in the community. We have a lot of people that can provide a lot of different programming, but we know from the grief and loss groups that you've done in the detention centers that that's something these kids could use. So before the pandemic, everything's before and after now. Before the pandemic, we had a really great group of 7 young people that we did a grief and loss group with. They were all coming from residential treatment facilities. I think a few of them from Mary Grove, one from St. Vincent's. Anyway, they all came from treatment centers, even though they were what we would call community-based because they weren't being detained in a detention center and had not been put into a Division of Youth Services. They were not able to go home, but they had more flexibility. So anyway, we were able to use some space at Holy Communion in University City, which was a great location because it was easy for the deputy juvenile officers to get those 7 kids to that site. They met with them for 5 weeks in a row, 1.5 hours once a week for 5 weeks. Great kids. And at the end of the 5 weeks, they said, do we have to stop? All of them had gone through some kind of loss of individuals, loss of their home, loss of school stability, so many things that they're grieving. And but there was, I believe we had only 1 girl and 6 boys, so it was a great group. We felt like we really helped them through and gave them tools to deal with their grief situation so that when they started to feel those things coming on, what could they do? What were the tools they could do to make things better for them in that moment? So along comes the pandemic. So now we have a grief group and we have kids that were recruited from the DJOs will recommend kids that are in the community. They may be living with a parent or guardian, or they may be coming from a residential treatment facility like the ones we had in the first group. But anyway, we had a small group. We're going to do it by Zoom. Let me tell you that a grief and loss group by Zoom, where kids have been Zooming for school, or they've been doing so many other, very difficult to get them all to show up every week at the same time. And what ended up happening is really one young man really was determined to come every week because he'd lost his father a couple of months before. He got in trouble with the court, and he really needed to have somebody there. So 2 chaplains, 1 boy, and they worked with him for those weeks. And on top of that, we're able to actually talk with his mother and help her because she was struggling too. So we see the community-based programming, once we get away from this pandemic, as being something that we'll be able to do along with the kids that are detained and in DYS. The juvenile justice system, they're trying to really work it so that as few kids go to detention as possible. That's why they may be court involved and they may be in the community with their parents or a parent, or with in a detention home or a residential treatment facility. The idea is putting kids in detention is not a good thing, and many times it makes things worse when they go and then they come back, and it's better to keep them out if you can. So that's why they're trying to keep kids, and that's why if you were involved with ECM birthday parties 10, 12 years ago, you might have seen 50, 60 kids at city or 50, 60 kids at county. Now, we hardly ever get over 30 kids at either site, and that is intentional. However, the kids that are there, they've had the most serious charges: murder, gun violations, carjackings, or they could be kids that just keep coming back for various reasons. So they're either there because they've been charged with something that was violent or a danger to the community, or they just keep coming back because they keep getting in trouble. So they stay there longer because they're waiting for hearings. They're waiting to see if they're going to be certified as an adult, go over to the adult system. And that can be really nerve-wracking for the kids. And sometimes that causes them to be argumentative and get into fights in the justice center or in the detention center. And so a lot of times the chaplains will be called and said, I think we really need you to talk to so-and-so because they're really having a hard time because they're waiting for their hearing and they need somebody to vent to and to help them through this time. And it's really hard on the chaplains when they know a kid is going to probably get certified because they know they're going to go over to the adult system, and that can be really tough. There are, I don't know if you've heard in the news, but there have been some changes in the legislature in Missouri. 2018, they voted to, they put in a legislation called Raise the Age, and it went into effect on January the 1st, 2021. Even though it went into effect at that time, only 5 counties in the entire state of Missouri are implementing it. And what this Raise the Age does is no longer is someone at the age of 17 automatically put over into the adult system. Now that age has been raised to 18. So we'll be seeing a few more 17-year-olds over in the detention center because they're not automatically seen as adults at 17. However, that does not stop 15, 16 being certified. Pardon me?
With the patio,
Okay.
what should I be
Mark,
working on
Mark,
next?
Will you find the shovel, sweetie? And then
Mark, oh, there we go. She got
Yeah. Anyway, so, but the good news is one of those 5 counties is St. Louis County. Leslie Bell said, I don't care if it's not being done in other counties, we're going to do it. The reason it's not being implemented in other counties, even though the legislature put it in place, they didn't fund it initially. I have been heard, I did get here on a conference session I had a few days ago that they finally funded it. So we'll see how that changes things. St. Louis City did not implement it, which is kind of crazy. I would have thought they would have, along with St. Louis County. But so things will be changing a little bit. The other thing that is the legislature's been working on, and we're hoping will for sure happen, we'll have to see. It may go into effect in August. And what that is doing is kids that are juveniles but been certified as adults, I know this is confusing, might be allowed to stay in the detention center, even though all of their legal scenario will be handled in the adult system. They think housing them in the detention center where they can get schooling, where they can get programming that they don't get over in the adult system, will be helpful to the kids. And what will happen is they'll have a unit in the detention center where they will house the the adult certified kids, so that they can be in an environment that's better for them than being over in the adult justice system. Unfortunately, though, they'll only be there till their court case is resolved, and then the court will decide where they go. But so things are changing, which means Episcopal City Mission has to keep changing and evolving, and we're trying really hard to do that well. That's why we went into community-based chaplaincy a couple of years ago. It's why we made sure we could get into the adult justice center, so that we could call on those young people that are certified and keep in touch with them. One of the kids hasn't seen their parent the entire time, and they've been there almost 18 months. So the chaplain has been the most non-legal visitor that kid has had, and so we want to keep that up. So I know I've talked a long time. Is there questions? Can I help anybody with that? If not, I can talk a little bit more about things, but I always like to see what you're interested in knowing.
And you can put your question in the chat, or just unmute.
There is something in the chat, I think.
Was there? Oh, hold on.
That was saying goodbye.
Yep.
I think Anne has a question, and then I have a question.
Okay, great.
Anne?
I do. Good morning, Beth.
Hey,
So good to see you. Thank you for being here with us.
Oh, thank you. And by the way, I need to let you know that Anne made a recommendation to me for our board, and it worked out, and it's Jeff Yant, who's a member of your church. He is our treasurer, and we are so thrilled to have him. It's great. And thank you, Anne, for that recommendation.
Oh, you're welcome. We're happy for that connection.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic, what would you have said a chaplain's job description is? What would a typical day be like for them?
Well, one of the things they'll tell you is there is no such thing as a typical day, but what they'll do is a lot of times they'll plan programming. It might be Bible study. It might be a program where they can talk about grief and loss, or it might be a program where they can talk about gun violence. And they'll go in and they'll be all ready to do a group with the different kids. And then all of a sudden they'll get a staff member that says, hey, chaplain, we've got somebody who's really in a crisis and we need you to go work with them. That happened to Chaplain Deborah one day. She was all ready to do a program, and they called her and said, we have a young woman who is in the restroom and she is just having a really hard time. And won't come out from under the sink, and we hope you can maybe calm her and help her. So Deborah went in there, and she said, I sat on the floor with her for like half an hour, and she was all upset because she felt like she had totally disappointed her family. She didn't see a way out of where she was at. She was feeling totally just totally lost. And the more Deborah talked to her, the more she said, you are here and you have to cope with that. But that doesn't mean you have to be here forever. So she got her out of there, and then they went and talked for the rest of the evening. But they'll do different things. Like Deborah has been working with a group of volunteers in a program called Put the Guns Down. And one of the things that's been interesting about that is it's 2 or 3 community volunteers that came in, and they started working on programming with it's primarily boys at this point that come to the sessions, and they'll bring up a topic, and maybe it's something that's going on in the news, maybe it's something that one of the kids has brought up that they're concerned about. But what they find is that a lot of these kids, we see on the news so much gun violence, and we see it's young people, and but when you really get to talking to these people, they say, we're afraid to not have a gun. Now, how sad is that? That they feel they need a gun to be protected. One session, and this has been probably about a year and a half ago, Deborah said, Beth, everybody in there had either been shot or knew someone who'd been shot. And she said, it's just disappointing to know that that's real out there. Now, they also have different kinds of conversations and Put the Guns Down. And one day this was during the time that the impeachment was going on, not the first one, but the second one. And they do have access to TV, and they do see some of the news, but they got to talk, they wanted to talk about the impeachment. And so they said, okay, let's have a conversation. So they talked to him about it. And then they said, well, if you were president, let's bring that back to you guys. If you were president, what would you do? And I don't know if you've read this story, because we have put it out, and I think it might have been in one of the iSeeks, but they wrote down what they would do if they were president. Not one of them said they wanted money. What they said is, well, I would take care of the homeless, and I would make sure that people could eat and that everybody was taken care of. I mean, they were all about everybody else. And you think, wow, here are these kids who, yes, they've made some bad decisions, but when asked, what would you do if you were president? They were all about helping everybody. So it's very interesting what these kids think about.
I guess
the Bible study, let me just tell you a little bit about the Bible study that we do with them. There's a book called Doing Time with God, and it comes from an organization out of the East Coast called Straight Ahead Ministries. And they work with kids that have been in the justice system, but a lot of their work is aftercare. But they have this book that they put out, and it's very inexpensive for us to purchase. And they're stories that are written by, they're just one-page stories that are written by kids that were in detention. And then they put a Bible verse with it that pertains to the story. And then there's some questions and things. So we use that as the Bible study. And what's interesting is those stories the kids tell the chaplains, I can relate to this story because this is what I'm feeling. This is what I know. Because they're written by someone who's been through what they've been through. So anyway, there was a question, and I talked over somebody. Who was it? Catherine.
yes, thank you. And I wanted to segue from what the kids would do if they were president. I'm an OBGYN doctor and work in kind of related space. So I work in around getting food to low-income families and
Yeah.
We have data from DePaul that pre-pandemic, 40% of their moms, they didn't have enough food at home. Also had done some work at the state level, really focused a little more on women in incarceration. And at that time, the information we had was that the rate of incarceration for women in Missouri, like the slope of increase is steeper than anywhere else. And we're told by leadership at the state under the current administration that, probably 90% of those women have suffered some kind of sexual abuse during their lifetime. So do you work in advocacy, or does your work inform advocacy? I also, in my own clinic, care for a number of women who grew up in foster care, and just, I think it's the other side of these stories, just really, really painful, difficult history.
We will speak out when we think we need to speak out. Okay. Advocacy to me sometimes can be a little more in your face in some cases, and we don't do that, but
Public education.
but we do public education. We do, and in fact, we have 2 chaplains that are, as I said, are calling on these young people that are in the Justice Center. And one of the things that happened is one of the kids went to a hearing, and the hearing was such that they might be able to go back over to detention. I'm not sure exactly what's, because we don't try to get into the nitty gritty of the legal system unless the kid talks to us and tells us more. But for some reason, there was a hearing that they might be able to go back over to detention. The judge didn't allow it, and this is a 15-year-old or something, and they wanted to go to school, so that totally bashed all hopes there. And so the chaplain Deborah called me and said, I'm just very disappointed that the judge didn't see that this kid, and he's in there for something very serious. She said, is there ever a chance we can send a letter to the judge or whatever? I said, I don't know. And I said, but I'm not against it. I think we just need to figure out how we do it and do it right, so we don't ruffle any feathers, because we have a really good partnership with the detention centers and DYS and all that, and we want to make sure we keep that relationship. And a few years ago, we did ruffle. There was someone who ruffled some feathers. I mean, they were kind of strict on us for a little while. Nothing bad, just wanted to know where we were at and what we were doing. So we reached out to the case manager for these boys. Case manager said, it's okay, that would be a good idea, but you need to work with their lawyers because you need to make sure that you're doing it the right way. And so they'll be meeting with these 2 boys' lawyers next, I think it's the 25th of May, and they'll work on putting together a letter to go to the judge to say, this is what we know about these kids, and this is what we think could be helpful, especially when it came to being able to go over there. And if this law in August happens, there's a good chance these boys might go over there. But the other thing that's happening, and it's happening all over the country, cases are sitting because there's the pandemic. They're not having juries. They're not having things happen. And so they're just sitting there waiting. And that's a problem. I haven't really answered your question except to say that we do try to go to the churches and make sure that you know what's going on in the justice system. And we're always willing to answer any questions. And if we don't have the answer, we'll find it. I've been participating too in what they call the Juvenile Detention Initiative, Alternative Initiatives. And this is a group that the county family court has called in community volunteers, organizations, the schools, and even the chiefs of police of different municipalities. And every quarter we have a meeting. And this last meeting was to kind of update us on Raise the Age and what the legislation was doing, and also to tell us about the data. You know, what's happening with kids in detention? Why are they coming? Who's coming? There are girls coming. As you might know from the birthday parties, it's usually a handful. The numbers over the last year, it's been about 75% boys, 25% girls. Primarily, both the boys and girls are African American. The average age we see in the detention centers is 15. That's kind of that. I see a question here. How often do these kids return to detention? Well, unfortunately, often. In fact, there was a story, one of the volunteers for one of the birthday parties told me, she said she went to a birthday party and she was there and one of the kids, she said, oh, he said, I know how I know you. You were here last year for the birthday party. She's like, oh, well, I'm glad you remember me. But unfortunately, he was back there. And Chaplain Kevin will always say, he goes in and he sees a kid that's come back. He goes, what were you thinking? You weren't here. You were gone. And now you're back. What were you thinking? So, there's a lot of peer pressure. There's a lot of temptations out there that they get themselves into. And they're kids. They don't make wonderful decisions sometimes.
Beth,
Yes.
speaking of them being kids, and the American social class system, I thought everybody was innocent until proven guilty, and I also thought the state had a guardianship responsibility for an education. I mean, and you're making them wait there, waiting for their right under the Constitution. They should be getting an education, shouldn't they?
They are not required to provide, they being the justice centers, are not required to provide school.
That's as bad as Russia.
Yes, it is as bad as it. I shouldn't say that. So,
well, you
it's
know
very
what
disappointing, and I think it's a real problem, and that's one of the reasons we're looking forward to, if the law really does go into effect, that these kids can be housed over in the detention center, because once that happens, even if they're adult certified but they're housed in detention, they'll be able to go to school, and that's important. The other thing that when you talk about the law, one of the things
they give adults education, and you can take classes as an adult in jail. That makes no sense.
They're not set up. They say they're not set up to do it. We've tried everything we know to do. We even tried to get it so a tutor could go in and help them. I think you're looking at the justice center versus prison. Once you're in prison, there's programming there. The justice centers are not really set up for long-term scenarios, even though
they're run
it's been
county.
there 18 months. Go ahead, Catherine.
They're run county by county. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
That's one of the issues we've had, like Liza Weiss's work in terms of appropriate feminine hygiene products, funding through the prison system at the state level, but individual counties run their own jails. So pre-conviction, it's a different system, and it's harder to move change across the system.
Well, and that's part of what you're seeing in the city with the workhouse. There was a lot of things going on in the workhouse, and they were going, well, they're really just here temporarily. Well, no, they're not there temporarily, because the cases aren't going before the court, and they're just sitting there waiting, and there's a lot of things that are not happening for them. In the case of the kids in county detention, county justice centers, the people that run the county justice center, even they are concerned about these young people. And many times, if they're 15, 16, or even they're small in stature, they won't put them over in the adult units. They'll keep them in the infirmary. But being in the infirmary is like being in solitary confinement, because you're just sitting there waiting for things. It's not a good system. And we really do need to here's where we wouldn't have a problem being an advocate, is being able to say to the judges and to our legislatures, fund these things first. If you're going to do them, fund them, because out in rural Missouri, they're not funding any of this stuff for raise the age. Now, I heard that it was funded recently. I hope it gets signed by the governor. So we will see how it all plays out. But yeah, you're very right, Catherine. So much is from county to county how things operate. City and county detentions operate very differently. What's interesting about the City Justice Center, though, is they have made a separate unit for younger people that are at the Justice Center. So like where you saw those people burning things at the Justice Center and knocking out windows, the younger people were probably in a different unit, which made them safer. And I've been in the Justice Center there, and they showed me the facilities they have for the younger people, and it's pretty good at City. But yet you're hearing what's happening with the more serious situations, the older people. It's just not simple. Let's put it that way. And we know that. And Catherine, you brought up some really good things about simple things you think they would have access to that they just don't. And yeah, we can sit here and say, well, they have a right to go to school. Well, yeah, they do, but they see them there as temporary. But over in this county, in the detention centers, they have to have a school there, and they are run, and they make sure that they get schooling. And in fact, sometimes if you were involved in our virtual moment in time, there was a story that the superintendent told about at county detention. There was a young girl, she had a really horrible home life, and she was close to graduating, but she ended up back in detention at like 17 and a half or something. Or no, if she'd been 17 and a half, she'd have been an adult. But anyway, she was just about done with school. She was in the detention center, and Kelly said to her, did you finish school? Because she knew how important school was to this girl. And she goes, no. She said, let's go down to the principal here at the school. And they worked it out, and she only had 2 credits left, and they made sure she got her credits. And she said, so Kelly said to her, while you're here, we're going to make this time count. We're going to make sure you get your school finished. And she did. And they held a graduation for her in detention. So it depends on the staff. It depends on who's running things and if they're well funded. And so there's a lot of, people will ask me, well, what's the staff like? Well, it's like anything else. There may be 1 or 2 that are not quite there for the right reasons, but I will tell you that most of them are there because those kids need them to be there and they want to help them. And boy, the superintendent, Cheryl Campbell, who retired about 2 years now, could not have been more dedicated. In fact, she told the story that she visited a detention center when she was in high school, and she was so enthralled with what can be done to help kids that were in detention that she went to school and came back and worked for the detention center that she visited, and ended up replacing the superintendent who was at that very detention center where she had visited all those years ago. And she just said, I just felt the calling, and it was important to me to be there for these kids. So she served there for 32 years, started at the bottom and went all the way to the top. And it wouldn't surprise me if she's not volunteering there on weekends now. I haven't talked to her in a while, but so there are some really good people there. There's some good programming that comes there. They've had the symphony. St. Louis Symphony has come and played for the kids in county detention and city. They have the, what's it called? Prison Performing Arts has come to both county and the city. Not right now because of COVID, but they have some really great programs. 100 Black Men has been doing programming at city detention for years. We have a board member who's also a member of St. Timothy's, Steve Kroc, who has been volunteering and participates in the Put the Guns Down program with the kids there. He came to me after he'd done it for a while. And he said, Beth, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing sometimes. And at one point, a kid said to him, how do you can't relate to what I relate to. And Steve said, no, you're right. There's things that I can't relate to, but I can listen and I can learn. And the kid said, you know, you wake up in the morning because your alarm clock goes off. I wake up because there's guns going off, you know. And Steve said, it just made me, you know, sit back and go, wow, I want to be there for these kids. I want to understand. I want to be able to do what I can to help them. And but you know, he's been a great board member and he's great with the kids. So and he's a retired teacher, so he's got a really good background of working with kids, and he worked with kids that were in the learning disabilities. So anyway, so we have a lot of stories to tell. One of the things before it gets too late, we're updating our website, and it's going to be probably a couple of weeks before I have it all. Some of the things that I want you to kind of take a chance, if you get a chance to go watch. Because we did Moment in Time virtually last fall, our fundraiser, we were able to tape. We have 2 tapes that I'm going to be putting on the website there. One is our board member at the time, which was Mark Jordan. He talked about the vision of ECM and what we're doing. We had the bishop participate, and he talked about the mission and how important it is to reach out to these young people, and he told a wonderful story. He was great. And then we have a separate video of different volunteers, the chaplains. We had a couple of people that volunteer with the kids there. We have the superintendent of county detention, and it's all on one tape, and it kind of talks about their interactions with the kids and what that's like. Currently, you can see those actually videos on YouTube. We have actually, unfortunately, there's several channels. I'm trying to get it down to one. There's one channel. If you do Episcopal City Mission St. Louis, you get the right YouTube, and you can actually watch those videos before I put them up on the video on the website. I think they give you some really great insight, especially the one from the volunteers, of what it's like to work with these kids and what these kids are like. I was there one day doing some work. The detention centers have to audit their work. The state requires them to be audited and assess that they're doing things the appropriate way and they're following certain standards. So I got to go in and meet with some of the kids and help with the audit. And one of the kids, part of my thing was to find out about the food. Well, let me tell you, they were chicken, more chicken. I just can't stand having more chicken. And I chuckled. And then one of the kids said, I said, so, you know, what's it like? And then he said, you know, the hardest thing for me is that I'm not there for my little brothers and sisters. He says, I get to talk to him on the phone, but I'm just worried about him. I'm not there. And I said, well, that's got to be hard. I'm sorry to hear that, you know. So they really do love to know that people think about them because they think about others. And so the notes, and I know Anne was, the first time we had St. Peter's Valentine bags, Anne was the one who suggested it. And let me tell you, when they get those little notes that says God cares, or we're thinking about you, or you know, a Bible verse is written on a card in there, they really do appreciate it and care. And so we're always happy to deliver those things.
And Beth, we have a new Anne. It's Annie.
Okay.
Just put IE on the end of Anne. Annie Nat. And so I will connect you as well and
Okay.
see what we can do from the, the kids.
Well, they did do the Valentine bags again this year, and it was
That's
great.
right.
Yeah.
It is
So
great.
yeah.
Are you having another moment in time? Are you having a gala or?
This is where we're at. We think we're going to do it virtual again.
Okay.
And I know that things are getting better, but there's a part of me that, and Catherine may know, being a physician, I'm just a little worried that come October that there's going to be more varieties or variants. I just so we're planning for it to be virtual. And if things really, really, really get wonderful, maybe we'll change our minds. But it takes a lot to do it virtually, so we really need to be prepared to do it virtually. It actually turned out pretty well last time, and we were very happy about it.
Good.
And we had several people participate, and we had people that participated because they're one of two families participated because their father was on the board, and they had always heard their father talk about ECM, so they joined us virtually, which they would not have been able to do. And now they donate for themselves, not for their dad. So it's pretty cool what was able to happen. We also had the VIP experience, which was a young man called Brian Owens, who is a dynamite volunteer in the community, but also has a gorgeous voice and has been honored with Grammys. So he did a half hour program for us prior, which we called the VIP experience. I don't know that we're going to do any kind of that kind of a performance, but we may have something else, but we're trying to rework it. So but
I don't have a crystal ball, but in places of incarceration are high risk areas, and I don't know how well vaccines are being rolled out there.
Yeah.
And I do think things are better. I think we've really turned a corner, but I think it's going to be a really long tail in terms of continuing to deal with this in our society. But I don't speak for anyone officially. That's just my intuition.
No, and that's really been the hard thing is you sit there and go, okay, well, last year was simple. It was a simple decision. You just got to do it virtually or not do it. So this year I said, let's just do virtual. It turned out well. There were people that participated who said, I don't like to get dressed up and come to some event. This was easy for me. I loved it. And so I'm like, okay, what do we do? What do we do? So right now I'm leaning to virtual. But it could change. We'll see.
Things are always changing.
Yeah.
We are just beyond our time. So I thank you very much for your help, your presentation. I've learned so much, and let's give her a thumbs up and a thank you. But go to the website. Is there anything else that we can
go to YouTube and look for Episcopal City Mission St. Louis, because there's one in Massachusetts that has nothing to do with us. And but look for that one that has St. Louis behind Episcopal City Mission. That's the most current videos. I'm trying to get rid of the old one, but it's not easy, I've heard. I talked to multiple people. And also the website in a couple of weeks will have some new updates. But Moment in Time virtual will be October the 14th. And we're getting ready. We've been meeting already for 2 months, so we'll see how it all turns out.
Well, I'm sure it will be a grand success. And again, I thank you for all of your time. And
Oh,
Beth,
thank
you know, we look forward to having you in person.
Yes.
next week. So,
Ian, good to see
Thank
you.
you.
Right.
yeah.
Thank you, Beth. It was
Oh,
great to see you too.
Yeah.
Thank you for everything you do.
Oh, thank you guys. Bye-bye.
All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.